Good evening. Welcome to special election coverage from Channel 12 KBDI in Denver, Colorado, and from the public television service of Taiwan. In less than 30 hours, the polls will open in Taiwan's presidential election. We're bringing you a special program about the presidential election, talking with two experts who will explain the significance not only for Taiwan, but for the United States of what looks to be a very intense, tight election with tremendous implications for United States foreign relations and for the future of East Asia as a whole. My first guest is Dr. Yi-Chung Lai from the Taiwan think tank. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And my other guest is Dr. Chen Shen-Yen from National Chengchi University, the premier international relations university in all of Taiwan, and he is with the Institute of International Relations and is also a fantastic specialist on American presidential elections. And if we were having a show on American presidential elections, he could tell us quite a bit about that. Welcome, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Let's begin with both, if we can take a step back from the election, which begins soon, and for some of our viewers, they'll be watching this program after the election results are in, and we'll give the results in a special little segment that'll be put on at the end. But regardless of who wins this division in Taiwan, the election that's going on, let's set it up for the listeners and the viewers all across the world, because this will be on the internet. Dr. Yen, could you explain how it is that Taiwan is having an election? Most Americans aren't familiar with any Chinese culture having a functioning democracy.
Okay, originally when the KMT came to Taiwan, they brought with them the so-called, we call the Mainland China Constitution, which is an indirect election of the president. And the president was supposed to have term limits. But under Chiang Kai-shek, we had a revision. So he was allowed to continue to run. And then the National Assembly, which elected Chiang Kai-shek, was frozen in Taiwan, which means the same people kept electing him.
And he came to Taiwan because he lost the Civil War to Mao Zedong.
Yeah, he lost the Civil War to the communists in China. So he came to Taiwan and brought with him the National Assembly members who didn't have to face any re-election in Taiwan, so they continued to elect him until he passed away in 1975. So
you had a situation where the National Assembly that was governing Taiwan was people who were from Sichuan or Shanghai, of course, their districts were now run by the communists.
Yeah, but the reason for not having any re-election in Taiwan is because the KMT claimed to be the legitimate government of China. And they said, well, because China is currently under occupation by the communists, so we cannot hold any election in Shanghai or in Sichuan. So, they have to, serve continuously, which eventually changed. They were forced to retire in the early 1990s, and we have, changed the electoral system. So we have direct election since 1996. But before that, the KMT simply dominated. Because of this indirect election and because of the ban on political parties. So it's simply one party running for its own candidate, winning 98% of the votes from the National Assembly.
And the KMT, or the Kuomintang, is what we in English would call the Nationalist Party. And Dr. Lai, could you then explain for the viewers what happens then, how we go from Chiang Kai-shek's one-party rule to now a democracy in Taiwan?
I think basically the whole thing is that after Chiang Kai-shek, of course, the Jiang Jing-kuo, his son, continued to rule. And then the Taiwan, even until that time during the 80s, still did not have the direct presidential election, as well as the whole election about the whole National Assembly and the Legislative Yuan. So it is in the late days of the Jiang Jing-kuo, and then during the whole days of the Li Deng-hui as a president of Taiwan at that time, that started the whole democratization process. And the democratization process can be described as this, that is, through the gradual opening of all the public offices election in Taiwan. So first we have the National Assembly and the legislative members direct election, every one of them elected by the Taiwanese people. And then in 1996, we have a direct presidential election. So from 1996, every 4 years, this is the fourth year, of the fourth time of the presidential election. 1996, the first presidential election, Li Denghui elected as a president. He was the chairman of the Nationalist Party. And then the year 2000, we have the party changeover. That is the DPP candidate, opposition at that time, the Chen Shui-bian, became the president in year 2000. He got reelected again in year 2004. So, and year 2008, this is the fourth presidential election. And we have the DPP candidate, Frank Xie, and the KMT, that's the Nationalist Party candidate, Ma Ying-jeou. They are vying for the presidency.
Now, those earlier elections had some controversies. In 1996, the Chinese government was not very happy that Taiwan was having free presidential elections. Dr. Yan, can you remind the viewers of what happened then?
Yeah, I came back actually to Taiwan in 1995, 1996, and we have the first presidential election, and China was not happy first because in 1995, our president, Li Denghui, went to visit the United States. So in the summer, they already began to send, have some military exercise. And then few weeks before our presidential election in March 1996, few missiles were sent to Taiwan Strait, and which actually solidified our support for President Lee. In an election with 4 major candidates, each one get at least 10%. He got 54% of the vote. So China's so-called deterrence, or China's trying to scare Taiwan people not to support Li Denghui, actually help him to get more votes than the following 2 elections. This 1996, China tried to make it a move which actually got the opposite result. In 2000, again, China worried about the DPP candidate Chen Shui-bian. So the premier Zhu Rongji came out and say, Taiwanese people, you have to to be very careful. Don't make sure you don't vote for someone who is pro-independence, and the pro-independent candidate won the election. So China learned from that, and they didn't try to say anything or try to make any move during our election. Now they know anything they do will probably get exactly opposite result.
Now let's connect this to the United States. In 1996, when China started, as you said, firing live missiles offshore from Taiwan, President Bill Clinton sent United States aircraft carriers to patrol the Taiwan Straits and send a signal of support for the United States military support for Taiwan's democracy. I'm wondering if each of you could comment on what the feeling is in Taiwan about Senator Hillary Clinton, and if there's confidence that she would also be resolute in support of Taiwan's freedom.
I think about the expectation about the future American presidency, about the resolution regarding the security about Taiwan. I think during the past, you can say 8 or probably even 12 years of the exercises about the Taiwan-U.S. relationship. And I think right now the government as well as the people are more sophisticated in learning that probably all the security guarantee is not really there. And they're all basically conditional. And what that means basically is that how that fit American national interest. So that about the Hillary Clinton or the Obama or the Senator John McCain, I think here Taiwanese people, what they learned during those 12 years is that, yes, the United States is supporting our democracy. But also come to the military affairs that Taiwanese people, we have to do our share of responsibility. And no one here is expecting we're going to be a free rider riding on the United States security guarantee. And the closer cooperation between Taiwan and the United States regarding the issue of China, that's very needed, especially that China is always very nervous about the election. 1996, they fired the missiles, and the year 2000, the Premier Zhu Rongji at that time, they have 2 fingers. And year 2004, of course, China restrained itself by not saying anything. But this year, the Wen Jiabao just at the state that when China is violently suppressing the Tibetan protest, the Wen Jiabao also made a very strong words about the passage if the referendum has been passed and how that result will be.
Let's step ahead to that, because that has been a surprising development. The riots going on in Tibet, in some ways reminiscent of the 1959 uprising of the people of Tibet against the Chinese colonialists, which was brutally crushed with about 80,000 deaths. Dr. Yan, can you tell us how is that affecting the elections right now? Are people saying, boy, the idea of a common market with China, as Mr. Ma, the KMT candidate, has proposed, does that become a little more frightening when they think about more Chinese influence in Taiwan?
I think always, if the suppression is there in Tibet, Taiwan will always worry about, what will China do to Taiwan, if we do not fall into the fold. But there are two things I just want to remind people. One is back in 1989, during the Tiananmen Square, Taiwanese, of course, we were, some of our students and young, people are in solidarity with the students in Beijing. But after that, after the suppression, after the incident, when the whole West, including the United States, Australia, and some of the European countries, boycott China, Taiwan's businessmen continue. So in terms of, Taiwan's businessmen are very pragmatic. If it's not going to affect Taiwan directly, they probably will go. But this will affect Taiwan's voters who cast their vote. It will be a shadow in their mind. Ma Ying-jeou, although he talked about one China, this greater China common market, but he does have good credential in terms of condemnation of human rights violation in China. He always talk about that Chinese authorities should apologize to the victims' family of the Tiananmen Square incident. He also supported the Farun Gong, the religious freedom in China, condemning human rights. So in other words, his party, the previous leader went to China, shake hands, talk about, a closer relations, but he himself has never been to China. It make him like, because he was originally, his parents from China, he was born in Hong Kong, so he's not considered a typical Taiwanese. He has to make himself, make an extra effort so that he will not be considered to be sympathetic with the mainland authority. So in that sense, I think, what he said right now, right after the Tibetan uprising or the suppression, he talked about, if the uprising continue, if the killing continue, Taiwan will consider boycott Olympic game, which, it will be the first one to talk about this type of action.
Do you think it doesn't seem realistic to think that the Chinese dictatorship will suddenly improve its human rights in Tibet. So is Mr. Ma now stuck in an actual Taiwan, if he becomes the president, and he's leading in the polls right now? Do you really think Taiwan would actually boycott the Olympics?
I think that really depends on how Ma Ying-jeou at that time his decision will be if he become the president. And I think one of the reasons for Ma Ying-jeou to really say the word that strongly on condemnation against the violent suppression of Tibet, as well as be the first presidential nominee, and at least with a very high potential to become the president, to talk about the boycott of Olympics, is exactly because that he not only he does not want to show to the people in Taiwan that he's weak on China, but also I think he wanted to sort of, to a certain extent, show to the Chinese leadership that probably he's not going to be the cakewalk that just like they hope him to be. Because to many Chinese leadership, they believe that they have a closer relationship with the KMT, and they have the good relationship with the senior leadership in the Lianzhan. And they hope that Lianzhan can rein in on Ma Ying-jeou to help the Communist Party to constrain the KMT, especially to influence Ma Ying-jeou's policy. So interestingly enough, that Ma Ying-jeou at this time, when looking from the DPP Green side, that he goes even further than Frank Xie in talking about these issues. Of course, Frank Xie himself is not silent on this one either. 2 nights he spent during his campaign with the Tibetan solidarity as well as a candlelight vigil to support the human rights. And mind you, his idea about common market did get affected very tremendously due to this violent suppression of the Tibet.
Okay, and let's, to give some background, Frank Xie is the nominee of the DPP, the Democratic Progressive Party, and just like in America we have the red and the blue, it's the color identification is much stronger in Taiwan. The DPP,
blue and green.
Yeah, the DPP, which is the more Taiwan Independence Party, is the green, and the KMT, which is Mr. Ma's party, which is generally thought of as being in favor of closer relations with China, that those are the blues. Mr. Ma, who by the way was generally regarded as a successful mayor of Taipei, Taiwan's capital, before he became the presidential candidate, said something that was shocking for some of us to hear after the Tibetan situation. He said that Taiwan is sovereign, which is a statement he's never gone so far as to say before. He's always had this thing as we can say, well, we'll agree with the Chinese dictatorship when they say there is one China, but then we'll say there's two different meanings. Communist China means there's one China and Taiwan will be under the thumb of Beijing sooner or later. And he says, no, maybe one China means we can be, we can call it one China, but we can still keep our freedom and our self-determination. What do you think do you think his statement that Taiwan is sovereign, is this just election rhetoric, or will this really mean a policy that he follows through if he becomes the president?
Well, I think, right now in Taiwan, the overwhelming majority of the people believe Taiwan is sovereign. Taiwan is a sovereign nation because we do exercise our sovereignty over this territory in Taiwan, even though we only have 23 diplomatic allies, but still, we have our own military, we have our own, we are not under any control from the communist government. So that is no doubt. But the question is whether you want to exclude a possibility of future association with China. Okay, on this one, I think KMT believe, they are not going to exclude that possibility, whereas the DPP probably favor, possibility of a permanent separation and independence from China.
What, Mr.
Lai.
Dr. Lai, what do you think? Do you think do you think Ma will stick to his pro-sovereignty pre-election statement if he becomes the president?
I think when we talk about whether what Ma's position is, it is important to know that this election, especially when the campaign, the whole tactic has been running by both blue and green parties, actually this election is more about whether people would approve or disapprove of DPP's past performance, and whether people would like to believe in the one China market that is proposed at the KMT. It is not about pro-independence or pro-unification. It is not about whether you are Taiwanese or Chinese. And basically those issues, they had not been discussed very fervently in this election, also reflects the fact that the majority opinion here in Taiwan believe that Taiwan is sovereign, which mind you also admitted and agree with it. And the identity here that people expect them to be exclusively as Taiwanese, that also have an overwhelming majority supported it. And the future of Taiwan should be determined by the Taiwanese people. That was the DPP position. And mind you, also in his newspaper ad, also put it out very bluntly. And then that, I think, that is one of the reasons that incurred Wen Jiabao. When he talked about the issue on Taiwan, he put another stamp again that the future of Taiwan should be co-decided by both Taiwanese and Chinese people altogether. So basically, when we talk about the result of the election, since this election is not about unification and independence, it is not about whether you are Taiwanese or Chinese, then those opinion structures are still remain unchanged. So whoever becomes the president, I think it is important for the world to understand that that does not mean that when the Frank Xie becomes the president, that the Taiwan are going right now to declare independence tomorrow. And then Ma become the president, that Taiwan is going to unify with China probably within 2 or 3 years. It is not election about that.
Well, and you said it's an election about the popularity of the DPP, so all those folks who are hoping that John McCain becomes the next president might want to pay a special attention to this next question, because we have a situation somewhat like the United States where President Chen, the Green DPP incumbent president, was elected twice. He's now term limited. And because of, some people feel, many people would say, problems with just competence of administration and also with some corruption scandals, including one involving his wife, he is not very personally popular right now. And yet Frank Xie is running as the DPP candidate. I believe he was the mayor of Kaohsiung, the very large southern port city in Taiwan. So he's in the same position as John McCain to say, I'm the same party as the incumbent president, but even if you don't like the incumbent president, I want you to vote for me. How is he going about retaining his DPP base while also appealing to people who are dissatisfied with DPP President Chen's performance?
From the way I see how the Frank Xie run his campaign, the message is very simple. It is not an election about you want to retain President Chen Shui-bian or not. He is not going to be the president. I am running for the presidency. And so it's a comparison between me, the Frank Xie himself, and Ma Ying-jeou, the KMT candidate. And so his campaign is all about this. Whether you agree with this, his questioning about the Ma Ying-jeou, his green card issues, or the issue about the Ma Ying-jeou, his policy in one China common market, it's all about a comparison between Frank Xie and Ma Ying-jeou. And I have to say that to a certain extent, he is able to turn the election, the whole atmosphere from when we were about 2 months ago and greatly defeated, DPP greatly defeated in the legislative election. Right now, the whole atmosphere seems to be a very different one.
So you feel the even though, as you said, in January there were elections for the legislature, the KMT party won those overwhelmingly, and now has a veto-proof majority in the legislature. But you feel at least in the past few weeks of the election that the Greens are picking up momentum and closing the gap in the polls?
Yes, I think the fair description can be said that the momentum is on the DPP side, but I think KMT still retain the advantage. So the issue is that whether this momentum will get across right election day or before and after.
So Dr. Yan, what would have Frank Xie do different from what President Chen has done?
Okay, I think personally, he cannot just say, I'm not part of this Chen's administration, because he actually served as the prime minister or premier for about 1 year as well. So after he served, as mayor of Kaohsiung, so he's part of the team. So he cannot really cut it very clean. That's first one. Secondly, in terms of personality, I think Chen is much more stronger in terms of getting people excited, much better speaker, getting people, to the rallying. So Chen was very strong in rallying his supporters. And now, how can that trend, even though he's not popular now, but compare Frank Xie to Chen in 2004. I think, Chen was a much stronger candidate in 2004. And the KMT candidate at that time, the previous Lian Zhan, compared to Ma Ying-jeou, is a weaker candidate. So in 2004, Chen Shui-bian won by 30,000 votes, eke out a very small margin victory. So right now, I think, Frank Xie will have much greater obstacle to climb. And in 2004, we didn't even know any kind of, corruption scandal in the DPP regime. But in the past 3 years, a lot of them came out. So it's very difficult for Frank Xie. The only strategy I think he will have is saying, okay, our economy is not doing as well, and now this proposal for this common market strategy, will that work? Is that going to be the solution for Taiwan's economy? Ma Ying-jeou say yes. Frank Xie say probably will not be the solution. So that will be the debate. If people today worry, saying, common market means in the future you will have, free flow of labor, free flow of goods coming to Taiwan, You worry about Taiwan's people cannot, be competing with the low, the low-paid jobs. But the question here is, China does have ability to control the flow of labor of people. Hong Kong is an example. If Chinese government doesn't control this Hong Kong border, more people would like to go to Hong Kong to work, for higher wages. But China did. Okay, why would China authority say Taiwan can freely send our people, send our goods to China, whereas China would not dump their workers or their goods to Taiwan because they still want Taiwan to be unified with China in the future. So when we have an independence movement, when we show that we have these people who do not want to be associated with you, Chinese authority almost have to double its goodwill just to make sure that Taiwan will stay in the fold, will not make the drastic move of declaring independence, which probably will end up in a war. But China doesn't want that happen. So just making sure that they will continue to give us some of these goodies. I think that's what Ma Ying-jeou is betting on. So Frank Xie is trying to say, no, hey, Chinese authority, why would they give you all these free, good things where, it should be reciprocal in any kind of common market. But maybe China is willing to, sacrifice that.
So Mr. Ma has proposed a common market with China. And as you say, there are some who say that would be really bad for Taiwan.
It's a little
because
bit like the United States with Mexico before.
Right.
A lot of Americans worry about the cheap goods made in Mexico with fruits and everything coming into the United States. The same thing.
But now there's a second consideration besides the immediate economic impact, and that is on Taiwan's sovereignty. As you were pointing out before, after the Tiananmen Square massacres, it was the Taiwan businessmen doing business in China who stood against all the human rights activists in the world and said, oh, well, what's a bunch of dead protesters run over by tanks driven by Mongolian mercenaries in the People's Liberation Army? Let's keep doing business. Even if the common market with China is very successful economically and it makes Taiwan more prosperous, does it endanger Taiwan's sovereignty by making more and more people in Taiwan intellectually, economically dependent on China so that they will be more and more in favor of gradual submission and reabsorption to China?